I'm John Palamarchuk. I'm the lead cinematic environment artist on God of War 3. The cinematic artists are responsible for taking the art that we have existing in the game and generally making cinematics out of it. Environment artists only will build the world that you'll see, so they'll be building rocks and architecture and things like that. The way you go about building the environment art versus the character art is quite a bit different. Environment art uses a much more tiling, textures, and things like that, and character art is very one-off, specific, high-res. The way cinematics start off is there's a story that's written by the writers of the game. There's the script that we follow, and then when we establish the need for a cinematic, the animators will block it out. We don't really use storyboards. They'll just block it out in Maya in 3D. It'll go through a few iterations and then eventually be approved by the game director, and they'll send it off to us and we make it into a full-on cinematic. So we are basically trying to recreate ancient Greece. Between God of War 2 and God of War 3 I went to Greece and I saw a bunch of ancient ruins, and they weren't really that helpful because you see it thousands of years old, but we're trying to build it as if it's a modern day present era. And what it comes down to is we're merging a few elements from Roman mythology and Greek mythology to come up with our own God of War spin on what the Greek mythology was. Working on the PlayStation 3, the technology requires much more manpower. So just to give you a little bit of perspective, for the cinematics, the cinematic environment team on God of War 2 was one person. And now we've grown to 8 people this time around, and that's just because the game's bigger, there's more story, more cinematics, and just the amount of effort that is required to get those pretty graphics on the screen is much greater. So my favorite cinematic probably in the game would be the opening intro. And it starts off all the way down in Hades and you're flying all the way up and you see the Titans climbing up. It just shows you the epic scale of the world that we've created. It continues to fly all the way up past the Titans into Olympus, and you see the gods at the top on their, basically on their little castle there. And it's like the good guys versus the bad guys. It really gets you into it, and then right away we just cut right into gameplay. And that cinematic really served to help tie the story from the second game into the third one, and then just jump you right into the third game and have at it with Kratos.
So this is one of the cinematics we did for the game called the Poseidon intro, and it's when we first show Poseidon in the game. This video right here is what the cinematic animators would pass off to the cinematic artists. As you can see, it's very bare bones. They block out the camera. The artist will go in, take this rock, and for example, we'll make it explode, add special effects and everything for the engine. We'll res up the detail for anything that's closer to the camera. There we see Zeus and Poseidon. And then we definitely would go in and we layer everything up. So I can turn on some extra layers. You can see we build all of Olympus out. There's a lot going on. Get the skybox in there. And that's really how the scene comes together.
I'd say my proudest moment in God of War 3 was the Icarus Ascent levels from the E3 demo so far, because that's been released publicly, and there's always that shot at the very end when you're charging at the Titan, and it kind of really dialed that in, and then all of a sudden it just cuts to the God of War 3 logo, and everyone who ever watches that, they're always like, oh, how does it end, how does it end, and you know, there's a lot of time and effort put into just dialing that in perfectly to make it that epic cliffhanger right at the end of the demo. On the previous God of War games, we would use high-res cinematics, and it was very obvious to the player that, okay, this isn't in-game. Now we're going to be switching. It'll just be a camera cut, it'll be instantaneous, and you won't ever know whether it's a cinematic pre-rendered or whether it's real-time. It's definitely the cinematic artist's job to make sure that it matches perfectly in-game to cinematics. So sometimes we'll cut to a pre-rendered cinematic, and it'll be like 5 seconds, and you won't even realize it, and then we'll cut back into the gameplay. It's always seamless if we did a good job, and I think we did.